In the midnight hour of October 15th, 2024, beneath crystal chandeliers of the Obsidian Palace in Ravenwood, Massachusetts, Emma Thorne, 23 years old and newly hired waitress, accidentally signed to the mute daughter of the vampire king during a royal banquet. The entire hall fell silent as 500 conversations died mid-sentence. What Emma didn't realize was that she was the first person outside the princess's tutor who had ever spoken her language, and the lonely king watching from his throne would move heaven and earth to keep her there. The goblets captured candlelight, like frozen stars. Shadows stretched across marble floors, and the air itself seemed to crystallize with tension. As Emma's hands formed those fateful signs, she performed the most unexpected act in 3 centuries of vampire court history. She made the silent princess smile. This is the story of how broken silence became the bridge between 2 worlds that never should have met. Subscribe now to discover how one human's compassion would transform an ancient kingdom forever. Crystal goblets captured candlelight like frozen stars. Emma's hands trembled as she balanced the silver tray, weaving between lords in velvet cloaks and ladies dripping jewels. 3 months working in the palace, and she still wasn't accustomed to the weight of vampire eyes following her every move. "More wine for Lord Cassius," the head server hissed, pushing her toward the main table. Emma's heart hammered. The main table where the king sat. She had seen King Aldrich only from afar, a figure carved from marble and shadows, with eyes that could freeze blood in one's veins. Tonight he wore black armor, even at dinner, as if expecting war to break out between the soup course and dessert. But it wasn't the king that made her pause. It was the small girl seated beside him. Princess Ilara couldn't be more than 7 years old. While nobles laughed and toasted around her, the child remained perfectly still, staring at her untouched plate. Her dark hair fell over pale cheeks, and her small hands rested in her lap like wounded birds. No one spoke to her. No one even looked at her. Emma approached the table, her steps silent on the marble floor. She reached for the king's empty goblet, her movements careful and rehearsed. "Don't make eye contact. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't—" A passing server bumped her elbow. Time slowed. The tray tilted. 3 crystal goblets slid toward the edge, spinning through the air in a cascade of silver and glass. They shattered on the table directly in front of Princess Ilara, red wine exploding across white table linen like fresh blood. The entire hall went silent. 500 conversations died mid-sentence. Forks froze on their way to mouths. Even the musicians in the corner stopped playing, the final note hanging in the air like a held breath. Emma's knees hit the floor. "Forgive me, Your Majesty, I—" But her eyes found the princess first. Wine had splashed onto her sleeve. A shard of crystal rested inches from her hand. Yet the girl didn't recoil, didn't cry out. She simply stared at the mess with wide, dark eyes, her small body rigid with fear she couldn't express. Without thinking, Emma's hands moved. "Are you all right?" She signed quickly, instinctively. The way she'd signed to her little brother back in the village before the fever took him. Her fingers formed the familiar shapes, the gesture for "you," the concerned expression, the questioning tilt. Princess Ilara's head snapped up. Her eyes met Emma's, truly met them for the first time. They were midnight-colored, huge in her small face, and suddenly filled with something that looked like lightning trapped in a bottle. The princess's hands flew from her lap. "I am fine," she signed back, her movements jerky with excitement. "You know sign. You know how." Her small hands trembled as they formed the words, moving so quickly they blurred. A smile broke across her face, the kind of smile that hadn't seen sunlight in a very long time. "No one understands signs except the teacher," Ilara continued, leaning forward in her chair. "Are you new? What is your name? Do you know the sign for dragon? I learned yesterday." Silence. The king's voice cut across the hall like a blade through silk. All heads turned, all spines straightened. Emma felt the word wrap around her throat like a noose. King Aldrich rose from his throne, unfolding to his full height. He was tall, impossibly tall, with shoulders that blocked the candlelight behind him. His crown weighed on his brow, dark metal studded with blood-red rubies. He wasn't looking at Emma. He was looking at his daughter. Princess Ilara's hands froze mid-sign. The smile slipped from her face, replaced by that terrible stillness Emma had seen before. The girl's eyes dropped to her lap, and her shoulders curved inward, making her even smaller than she already was. The king's gaze shifted to Emma. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. His eyes were the color of winter storms and equally cold. "You," he said softly. "Stand." Emma's legs barely supported her as she rose. Around the hall, nobles whispered behind jeweled hands. She caught fragments of their words, signed to the princess. Never seen her respond to anyone, just a human servant. How dare she? King Aldrich stepped down from the platform, each step deliberate. The crowd parted before him like water before a ship's prow. He stopped 3 paces from Emma, close enough that she could see the silver threads in his dark hair, the faint scars on his knuckles that spoke of old battles. "Where did you learn this?" His voice was low, but it carried across the silent hall like thunder. "In my village, Your Majesty." Emma's voice faltered. "My brother was born deaf. I learned to speak with my hands so he wouldn't be alone." The king's expression didn't change. "Your brother, where is he now?" "Dead, sir. 5 years ago." Something flickered across the king's face, too quickly to name. He looked back at Princess Ilara, who watched them with desperate, pleading eyes. The nobles waited for the king's judgment. Some looked eager, hoping for entertainment. Others looked uncomfortable, perhaps remembering their own humanity buried deep beneath centuries of immortal pride. King Aldrich turned to his butler, a thin vampire with silver spectacles who stood near the throne. "Find this woman's name and station. Report to my office within the hour." He returned to his seat without another word. The musicians began to play again, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Conversations resumed. Servants hurried to clean up the spilled wine and broken crystal. But Princess Ilara's eyes never left Emma as she was led away. Her small hands moved one last time, hidden under the table, where only Emma could see. "Thank you." Emma spent the next hour in the servants' quarters, waiting for the executioner's summons. The other servants gave her pitying looks and a wide berth, as if misfortune might be contagious. "You're the girl who spilled wine on the princess?" an older woman asked, shaking her head. "Better make peace with whatever god you pray to, child." But when the butler finally arrived, he brought no guards. He brought instructions. "You are to report to the East Wing kitchen at dawn," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "You will be assigned to the morning shift. Your duties will include preparing and delivering the morning coffee service to the princess's courtyard." Emma stared at him. I'm not being dismissed." The butler's lips twitched. "No, girl. You are being promoted." He left before she could ask what that meant. That night, Emma lay awake in her narrow bed, replaying the moment over and over. The way the princess's entire face had transformed when she signed to her. The way her hands had moved so quickly, so eager, so desperately happy. And the way the king had looked at his daughter afterward, when he thought no one was watching. Not with anger, with something that looked almost like longing. The king's private office smelled of old leather and even older secrets. Shadows gathered in the corners despite the fire burning in the hearth, as if even light knew better than to venture too far into Aldrich's domain. He stood by the window, watching the moon paint silver stripes across the palace gardens. Behind him, his butler waited with the patience of one who had served for 3 centuries. "The human waitress," Aldrich said without turning. "What do you know about her?" The butler consulted his leather-bound ledger. "Emma Thorne, Your Majesty, 23 years of age, arrived from the eastern villages 3 months ago seeking work. Her references indicate reliability." "And the sign language?" Aldrich's fingers pressed against the cold glass. "How does a village girl learn such things?" "She had a younger brother, sir, born without speech or hearing. She learned to communicate with him before he succumbed to illness." The butler paused. "The village priest taught them both. Apparently, it is a language used in certain human monasteries for silent prayer." Aldrich closed his eyes. He had hired 7 tutors for Ilara in the past 2 years, private instructors who came at dawn and departed at dusk, teaching his daughter to communicate in the language of hands and expressions, but they were paid professionals doing a job. Tonight, he had watched his daughter smile for the first time in months. Because of spilled wine and broken crystal, a human girl had given Ilara something no amount of gold could buy. Someone who spoke to her simply because she could. The girl was animated, Aldrich said softly. I've never seen her move her hands so quickly. Princess Ilara did seem quite taken with her, yes. Yes. Taken. Such a simple word for the desperate hope that had shone in his daughter's eyes. Aldrich had seen that look only once before. The day Ilara's mother died, when the girl screamed silent screams that no one could hear, her small hands forming words her father couldn't understand. That was the day Aldrich stopped trying to reach her, not because he didn't love the girl, but because every attempt felt like watching his daughter drown while he stood on the shore, unable to swim. Assign her to the day shift, Aldrich said, near the princess's wing. The butler's quill scratched against parchment. Very good. Sir, shall I inform her of the reason for the transfer? No. Aldrich turned from the window. His reflection in the glass looked older than it had that morning. Let her think it's simply a new assignment, nothing more. As you wish. The butler bowed and moved toward the door, then hesitated. Sir, if I may speak freely. Aldrich nodded once. Princess Ilara has been alone for a very long time. Perhaps this is not such a terrible accident after all. After the butler left, Aldrich sat at his desk and pulled open a drawer he rarely accessed. Inside was a painted miniature. His late wife, Elena, laughing with baby Ilara in her arms. She had been human once before choosing immortality to stay by his side. She would have known what to do. She would have learned sign language within a week, would have filled their daughter's silent world with conversation and laughter. But Elena was gone, and Aldrich had an entire kingdom to rule. Wars to plan, treaties to negotiate, 100 crises demanding his attention every day. Except none of them mattered as much as the small girl who sat alone at banquets, invisible in plain sight. Aldrich's hand moved experimentally, trying to recall the signs he'd glimpsed at dinner. His fingers felt awkward, strange. How had the girl made it look so easy? He pulled his hand back, frustrated. Tomorrow. He would deal with this tomorrow. Meanwhile, in the servants' quarters, Emma stared at her new assignment document in disbelief. The princess's wing. Her roommate, Mari, gaped at the notice. That's where they send the most trusted servants, people who've worked here for years. I must have read it wrong. Emma held the paper up to the candlelight, but the words didn't change. Report to the East Wing kitchen at dawn. Deliver morning coffee service to Princess Ilara's private courtyard. Daily assignment until further notice. You spoke to the princess in that hand language of yours, didn't you? Mari's eyes were wide. Everyone's talking about it. They say she actually smiled. She's just a child, Emma said softly. A lonely child. She's the heir to the vampire throne. Mari grabbed Emma's shoulders. Do you understand what this means? The king does nothing by accident. He's deliberately placing you near his daughter. A chill ran down Emma's spine. Why would he do that? Maybe he wants to see if it was a fluke, or maybe... Mari's voice dropped to a whisper. Maybe he's testing you, seeing if you're a threat. I'm not a threat to anyone. But Emma's hands trembled as she folded the assignment paper. The princess looked so frightened when the glass broke. I wanted to make sure she was all right. Well, tomorrow you'll have your chance to make sure again. Mari squeezed her arm. Just be careful, Emma. The royal family isn't like us. They don't think like us, and that little girl, she's not just a child, she's the property of the crown. That night, Emma dreamed of small hands forming desperate words in the dark, and a king made of winter, watching from a distance, unable or unwilling to reach out. Dawn broke cold and golden over the palace. Emma's hands trembled as she balanced the breakfast tray, not from its weight but from the knowledge of where she was taking it. The princess's courtyard lay at the end of a marble corridor, lined with portraits of stern-faced vampire ancestors. Their painted eyes seemed to follow her, judging, a human servant walking where few were permitted. She pushed the iron gate open with her hip. The courtyard took her breath away. Night-blooming flowers covered every surface, moonvines and shadow roses that should have closed with the rising sun, but somehow remained open here, their luminescent petals in the morning light. A small fountain burbled in the center, its water crystal clear. Stone benches curved beneath a willow tree that wept silver leaves, and there, sitting cross-legged on the grass, was Princess Ilara. She hadn't noticed Emma yet. Her attention was fixed on something in her hands, a small bird's nest cradled carefully in her palms. She examined it with a serious concentration that only children can muster, her dark hair falling into her eyes. Emma set the tray down on a nearby table. The soft clink of porcelain made Ilara's head snap up. Her eyes widened. Then her entire face transformed, that same brilliant smile from the night before breaking across her features like sunrise. "You came," she signed, rising quickly. The bird's nest wobbled precariously. "I thought perhaps I had dreamed you. No one told me you would be here. Are you my new morning coffee person? What is your name?" Her hands moved so quickly, Emma could barely keep up. She laughed, setting down the teapot before signing back. "Slow down, little princess. Yes, I am real. My name is Emma." "Emma?" She carefully spelled it with her fingers, learning. "It's a pretty name. Can you stay while I eat? Please? Teacher doesn't come until after lunch and there's no one to talk to." She stopped abruptly, her smile faltering. Her hands lowered and that wary look returned to her face. The same one from the banquet when her father had spoken. "I'm sorry," she signed, small and quick. "You probably have other work. I shouldn't keep you." Emma's heart broke. She knelt on the grass beside her, ignoring the dew soaking her dress. "I have nowhere more important to be than right here." Ilara stared at her, then slowly the smile returned. "Really? Really?" For the next hour, Emma learned more about Princess Ilara than she had thought possible. She showed Emma her collection of interesting rocks, arranged by color along the garden wall. She explained through elaborate signs and animated expressions how she was studying the birds that visited the fountain every morning. A family of sparrows had built a nest in the willow, and she had found this one fallen beneath it. "Do you think they're sad?" she signed, holding the empty nest. "For losing their home?" "Maybe," Emma signed back, "but birds are clever. They'll build a new one. I'd build one for them, but my hands are too big." She looked at her palms sadly. "Well, too big for bird nests. Too small for everything else." "What do you mean?" Ilara hesitated. Her hands moved slowly now, carefully. "Father has big hands, warrior hands. He can hold swords and sign treaties and lift heavy things. My hands can only do this." She wiggled her fingers. "Talk that no one else understands." "I understand," Emma signed. "You're the only one, except teacher." Ilara sat beside her on the grass. "You know what's funny? In the whole palace with hundreds of people, only 2 can hear me. And one of them is paid to do it." The casual way she said it, as if she had accepted her isolation as simple fact, made Emma want to scoop her up like the fallen nest and promise to keep her safe. "Well, now you have me," she signed, "and I'm not going anywhere." Ilara's eyes grew suspiciously bright. She nodded quickly, then stood and pulled Emma's hand. "Come. I want to show you my favorite place." She led her to the farthest corner of the courtyard, where the morning light hit just perfectly, making the dew-covered grass sparkle like diamonds. She sat down and patted the ground beside her. "This is where I come when I'm sad," she signed. "It's pretty. Pretty things help." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher. A sparrow landed on the edge of the fountain, cocked its head at them, then flew away. "Emma," Ilara signed after a while, "can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you help me last night? You could have gotten in trouble. You still might." Emma thought carefully about her answer. "Because you looked frightened, and no one should be frightened and alone at the same time." Ilara absorbed this. Then she signed with the brutal honesty of children. "I get frightened and alone a lot." Before Emma could respond, footsteps echoed from the corridor. They both turned. A figure stood in the archway, silhouetted against the morning sun. King Aldrich. He wasn't wearing his armor today, just dark clothes that made him seem less like a warrior and more like a man. His eyes moved from Emma to his daughter, then to their hands, frozen mid-conversation. How long had he been watching? Ilara rose quickly, her earlier joy evaporating. She bowed her head, small and formal and perfectly obedient. The king took a step forward, stopped. His jaw worked as if he wanted to say something but didn't know how. Finally, he turned and walked away without a word. Ilara sat down slowly. She didn't sign anything else that morning, just held the bird's nest in her lap and stared at where her father had been. Rain hammered against the palace windows like 1,000 impatient fingers. Emma had been delivering morning coffee to Ilara's courtyard for 6 days now, and every morning the princess was already waiting for her, usually with something new to show, a butterfly wing, a perfectly round stone. Once, a drawing she had made of the two of them sitting by the fountain, but today the courtyard was empty. Emma set down the tray, worry gnawing at her stomach. Had something happened? Had the king changed his mind about her assignment? A small hand tugged her sleeve. She spun and found Ilara standing behind her, practically vibrating with excitement. Her hair was damp from the rain, her clothes speckled with water. "Come with me," she signed urgently. "I want to show you something secret. Princess Ilara, you're soaked. You should, please." Her eyes were huge and pleading. "It's important and it's inside." How could anyone say no to that face? Ilara grabbed her hand and pulled her through a side door Emma had never noticed before, down a narrow servants' passage, then up a spiral staircase that seemed to climb forever. Finally, they emerged into a long corridor lined with tall windows. At the end was a huge oak door carved with intricate symbols, the royal library. "We can't," Emma signed quickly. "Servants aren't allowed." But Ilara was already pushing the door open. The library was magnificent. Shelves stretched up 3 stories, connected by spiral staircases and narrow bridges. Rain light filtered through stained glass, painting the floors in muted rainbows. The smell of old paper and leather hung thick in the air. "Isn't it wonderful?" Ilara signed, her face glowing. "No one comes here anymore. Father is too busy. The nobles think reading is boring. It's just me and the books." She pulled Emma toward a low shelf in the corner where large illustrated books gathered dust. She selected one with a faded cover showing a castle and a dragon. "These are vampire fairy tales," she signed. "Teacher reads them to me, but I like it better when I tell them myself." She opened the book, and Emma saw that someone, probably a tutor from years past, had added small sign language diagrams in the margins, showing how to sign each important word. Ilara's hands began to move, telling the story. Her signing was beautiful, expressive, and fluid, painting pictures in the air. She signed about a brave knight and a lonely dragon who couldn't breathe fire, about how everyone feared the dragon for what it was supposed to be, not for who it really was. Emma found herself drawn into the tale. When Ilara signed the part where the dragon finally roared, not with fire, but with wind that carried flower petals, she acted it out, sweeping her arms widely and making the princess laugh silently, her small shoulders shaking with joy. "Your turn," she signed, pushing another book into Emma's hands. This one was about a princess who lived in a tower. Emma signed the story, exaggerating her expressions, making Ilara's eyes widen at the scary parts and light up during the happy ones. When she signed about the princess dancing alone in her tower, she stood up and twirled, nearly knocking over a stack of books. Ilara clapped, not making a sound, but the gesture of applause all the same. She jumped up to join her, and they spun together between the bookshelves, the forbidden library becoming a stage for stories that only they could tell. They didn't hear the door open. "Ilara!" The king's voice cut through their joy like a blade through silk. Emma's heart stopped. She dropped into a curtsy so quickly her knees hit the floor, pain shooting up her legs. Beside her, Ilara froze mid-twirl, her arms falling to her sides. King Aldrich stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his dark cloak. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone, giving nothing away. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," Emma gasped. "I didn't mean to. The princess wanted to show me. I should have refused." "Stand up." She obeyed, legs trembling. This was it. She would be dismissed, possibly worse. But the king wasn't looking at her. He was watching his daughter. Ilara stood perfectly still, head down, awaiting judgment. All the light had gone out of her, replaced by that terrible, resigned stillness. The king entered the library. His boots echoed on the marble floor. He passed Emma, past the scattered books, until he stood directly before Ilara. Then he did something unexpected. He knelt, brought himself to his daughter's level, his cloak pooling around him like spilled ink. Ilara's head rose slowly, confusion written on her small face. The king's hand moved, awkward, uncertain, forming a single sign, one that Emma had taught him during their morning conversations, though Ilara couldn't know that. Happy. It was rough, the fingers not quite right, but the meaning was clear. You look happy. The king tried to sign, though his hands stumbled over the words. Ilara's eyes widened. Her mouth opened in a silent gasp. The king looked at Emma then, and she saw something in his expression she hadn't expected. Not anger, not suspicion. Desperation. "Stay," he said quietly. "Continue." He moved to a chair near the window, far enough away to give them space, close enough to observe. He didn't pick up a book or pretend to work. He simply sat and watched, as Ilara, after a long moment of shock, slowly picked up the storybook again. "Should we?" Ilara signed hesitantly to Emma. She looked at the king. He nodded once, so they continued. Ilara signed her stories, and Emma acted them out, and occasionally, very occasionally, Ilara would look at her father as if checking to make sure this wasn't a dream. The king watched his daughter speak with her hands, and though he couldn't understand most of it, he didn't look away. Not once. The whispers started small, like poison seeping through cracks. "Have you heard? The human girl spends hours alone with the princess, in the library of all places. Completely inappropriate. The king allows it. Can you imagine?" Emma heard the rumors in the servants' hall, in the corridors, even in the kitchen, where she picked up Ilara's morning coffee every day. The other servants no longer met her eyes. Some looked at her with envy, others with pity. Mari pulled her aside one evening, her face pale. "They're saying you've enchanted the princess, that you're using her to get close to power." "That's ridiculous. She's 7 years old." "Emma, listen to me." Mari gripped her shoulders. "Lord Cassius spoke to the council yesterday. He said it's unseemly for a human servant to have such influence over the heir. He called you a security risk. A security risk for teaching a lonely child to smile? But the opinions of the nobles didn't truly frighten Emma. What frightened her was the look on Ilara's face when she was 10 minutes late for morning coffee one day. The panic in her eyes, the way her hands trembled when she signed. "I thought they had made you go away." She was becoming important to the princess, too important, and that made her vulnerable. The summons came on a grey afternoon. "Lord Chancellor Valerius requests your presence in the East Solar," a guard informed her, his expression carefully neutral. Emma's stomach sank. The Lord Chancellor was the king's chief advisor, second only to Aldrich in authority. His word could end her career, or her life. The East Solar was a cold room despite the fire burning in its hearth. Lord Valerius stood by the window, his back to her. He was an ancient vampire, thin as a blade, with silver hair pulled back in a severe knot. "Miss Thorne." He didn't turn. "Do you know why I've called you here?" "No, my lord." "I think you do." Now he turned, and his eyes were like chips of ice. "You've been seen spending considerable time with Princess Ilara, time that exceeds your duties as a morning coffee server." "The princess enjoys having someone to talk to, my lord. I merely—" "The princess," Valerius interrupted, "is the heir to the vampire throne. Her companions should be carefully selected from noble families, not plucked from the serving class on a whim." Emma's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "With respect, my lord, those noble families don't speak her language. A temporary limitation. The child will outgrow this affliction. She will learn to communicate properly like any other member of royalty. She already communicates properly, just not in a way you understand." The words escaped before Emma could stop them. Valerius's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You forget yourself, girl." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Let me be clear. There are members of this court who believe Princess Ilara is unsuitable as heir. They see her silence as weakness, a liability." Emma's blood ran cold. They want to replace her. They want a strong successor, one who can address the council, negotiate with foreign dignitaries, command respect. Valeria stepped closer, circling her like a predator. Your presence complicates matters. You make the princess comfortable in her isolation. You allow her to refuse to adapt. I help her feel less alone. You help her remain helpless. Valeria stopped in front of her. The kindest thing you could do for Princess Ilara is to distance yourself. Let her struggle. Let her learn to survive in a world that will not sign back to her. That is cruel. That is reality. Valeria's expression softened slightly, or perhaps it was a trick of the light. I am not a monster, Miss Thorne. I have served this kingdom for 4 centuries. I have seen weak rulers destroy nations. Princess Ilara needs to be strong, not coddled. He went to his desk and pulled out a sealed letter. This is a transfer order. You will be reassigned to the South Wing, effective immediately. Better wages, lighter duties. You'll never have to see the princess again. Emma stared at the letter as if it were a snake. And if I refuse, then you will be dismissed entirely. No references, no final wages. Valeria's placed the letter between them. Take the night to consider, but understand this is not a negotiation. It is mercy. Emma went to the courtyard the following morning, her heart heavy as stone. She had spent the entire night wrestling with the decision. Take the transfer and save her livelihood, or refuse and lose everything. But when she saw Ilara waiting by the fountain, her choice became clear. She knew immediately something was wrong. What happened? She signed, running over. You look sad. I'm fine. You're lying. Her small face was fierce. Your hands are doing that thing they do when you're upset. All stiff. Did I do something wrong? Emma's hands moved quickly. No, sweetheart. Never. Ilara's signs grew smaller, more hesitant. I can be quieter during our lessons. I won't ask you to stay so long. Please don't be angry with me. Oh, dear one, no. Emma knelt and took the girl's hands in hers. You've done nothing wrong, nothing. Then what? How could she explain that the girl's world was filled with people who saw her as a problem to be solved? Who wanted Emma gone because she made the princess happy? Some people think I spend too much time with you, she signed carefully. Ilara's face crumpled. Father. No, other people. People who don't understand. They never understand, she signed, and the resignation in those small hands broke Emma's heart. It's all right, you can go, everyone goes away eventually. The casual acceptance in her signs, as if abandonment was just another fact of life like rain or sunrise, made Emma's decision for her. I'm not going anywhere, she signed fiercely. Do you hear me? I'm staying. But you said, I don't care what they say. You're my friend. Friends don't leave. Ilara stared at her. Then she threw her arms around Emma's neck and held tight, her small body shaking with silent sobs. Neither of them saw the figure watching from the balcony above. King Aldrich, who had heard every word of Valerius's warning, and now watched his daughter cling to the only person who had chosen to stay. The knock on Ilara's bedroom door came after midnight. The princess sat cross-legged on her bed, organizing her rock collection by moonlight. She had long given up trying to sleep at normal hours. The silence of night seemed less lonely than the silence of day. When the door opened, Ilara looked up, expecting her night guard. Instead, her father stood in the doorway. King Aldrich seemed too large for the frame, his broad shoulders nearly touching both sides. He still wore his council clothes, though he had removed his crown. Without it, he looked different. Tired, almost human. Ilara froze, a smooth riverstone clutched in her hand. Her father never came to her chambers. They saw each other at formal dinners, at council presentations, where Ilara sat silent and decorative, at occasions that required the heir's presence. But never here, never in this private space that belonged to Ilara alone. The king entered and closed the door. Good evening, father, Ilara signed formally, putting away her rocks and sliding from the bed to curtsy. Aldrich raised his hand. Wait! His throat worked as if the words were stuck there. Finally, may I sit? Ilara nodded, confused. Her father never asked permission for anything. The king lowered himself onto the chair by Ilara's desk. a small chair made for a child, making him look almost comical, like a bear trying to fit into a dollhouse. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, and for a long moment simply looked at his daughter. Ilara shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny. Her hands moved nervously. "Have I done something wrong?" "No." Aldrich's voice was rough. "No, you haven't done anything wrong." Silence stretched between them. Ilara's fingers twitched, wanting to sign, wanting to fill the void with words her father wouldn't understand, but she kept her hands still, waiting. "I have been thinking," Aldrich said finally, "about your mother." Ilara's eyes widened. They never spoke about her, not since she died. She would know what to do, what to say. The king's hands clenched into fists. She was good at talking, at connecting. I am good at war, at strategy, at breaking things. He looked at his scarred knuckles. But not at this, not... "You," Ilara signed before she could stop herself. Her father stared at the hand movements, and Ilara saw frustration flash across his face. The same frustration Ilara felt every day trying to exist in a world that wouldn't speak her language. "This," Aldrich said softly, "not this." He stood abruptly, began to pace. The small room made him look like a caged animal. "I have conquered kingdoms, negotiated peace treaties in 5 languages, commanded armies of thousands, but I cannot." He stopped, his back to Ilara. "I cannot speak to my own daughter." Ilara's chest tightened. She had never heard her father sound like this, lost, vulnerable, nearly desperate. The king turned to face her. "You move your hands so quickly. With Emma. In the library, in the courtyard, I watch you, and it's like you're speaking in lightning, and I—" He raised his own hands, large and calloused. "I don't understand any of it." "I could teach you," Ilara signed eagerly, hope blossoming in her chest. "It's not hard, just shapes and—" But her father wasn't looking at her hands. Couldn't read the offer being made. Ilara's hands fell to her sides. Aldrich saw the movement, the disappointment. Something seemed to break in his expression. He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt before his daughter. The second time in 2 weeks, he had lowered himself to Ilara's level. "Show me," he said. "One sign, just one, for daughter." Ilara's breath caught. Slowly, she raised her hand and demonstrated. A simple gesture. Fingers pointed to herself, then swept outward. Aldrich copied, awkward and uncertain. His fingers didn't quite match the shape. Ilara took her father's hand, so much larger than hers, and gently adjusted the position. Her father's skin was warm, rougher than she had expected. She couldn't remember the last time they had touched like this. "Like this." She signed with her free hand. "Like this." Aldrich repeated the gesture. This time it was almost right. Ilara nodded enthusiastically. Then she showed him another sign. "Father." It was more complex. A hand at the forehead, then brought to the chest. "Protector." Strong. Aldrich practiced 3 times before getting it right. When he finally did, he looked at Ilara with an expression she had never seen before. Pride, perhaps, or relief. "Say something to me," Ilara signed, her hands trembling with excitement. "Please." Her father's jaw worked. He raised his hands, formed the signs slowly, deliberately. "My daughter." 2 words. Simple, imperfect, everything. Ilara's eyes filled with tears. She launched herself at her father, wrapping her small arms around his neck. Aldrich caught her, held her, a large hand cradling the back of his daughter's head. They stayed that way for a long time in the moonlit chamber, neither signing nor speaking, just holding on. When Aldrich finally pulled back, his eyes were suspiciously bright. He tried to sign again, struggled, then gave up and simply spoke. "I need help. Will you teach me more? Will your friend? Will Emma teach me?" Ilara nodded so hard her whole body shook. "Tomorrow then, after council." Aldrich rose, smoothing his clothes back to order. At the door he paused. His hands moved, uncertain but deliberate, forming the signs Ilara had just taught him. "Good night, my daughter." Ilara signed back. "Good night, father." After the king left, Ilara climbed back onto the bed and stared at the ceiling, her heart racing. For the first time in 5 years, Since her mother died and her world went silent, she allowed herself to believe in something she thought lost forever. Hope. In his private office, King Aldrich sat in the darkness, practicing the signs over and over until his hands cramped. He had failed his daughter for too long, but it wasn't too late. Not yet. The spring procession was the kingdom's oldest tradition, a celebration of renewal when the royal family greeted their subjects from the great balcony and accepted their blessings for the coming season. In 7 years, Princess Ilara had never participated. The child will be a distraction, Lord Valerius had argued each year. Better to keep her inside until she is older, more capable. But this year, when the council met to discuss the ceremony, King Aldrich's voice cut through the debate like a sword through silk. "My daughter will stand at my side." The council chamber fell silent. "Your Majesty," Lord Cassius ventured carefully, "with all due respect, the princess cannot address the people. It would be awkward for all involved." "She will stand at my side," Aldrich repeated, his tone allowing no argument, "and Miss Thorne will accompany us as her interpreter." The murmurs rose like an angry swarm of bees, a human servant on the royal balcony, interpreting for the heir. Unthinkable. Unprecedented. Aldrich let them protest, then he rose and the chamber quieted. "My daughter is the heir to this throne. It is time the kingdom sees her, not as a silent shadow but as their princess." His eyes swept the room, daring anyone to challenge him. "This discussion is over." On the morning of the procession, Emma's hands trembled so badly she could barely tie her dress. A new one, deep blue with threads of silver, provided by the king's butler. "Appropriate for the balcony," he had said, as if it were perfectly normal for a servant to stand beside royalty. Marie helped pin Emma's hair. "You look terrified." "I am terrified." Emma stared at her reflection. "What if I make a mistake? What if I can't translate fast enough? What if you help a little girl be seen by her kingdom for the first time?" Marie squeezed her shoulders. "You've got this." In her chambers, Ilara was equally nervous. She stood before the mirror in her formal attire, a small version of her father's ceremonial robes, black and silver with the royal crest embroidered on the chest. She looked like a storybook princess, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Her father entered without knocking, also dressed in full regalia. Crown, cape, the ancient sword of the kingdom at his hip. He looked every inch the warrior king, until he saw his daughter's fear and immediately knelt. "Scared," he signed. His signing had improved dramatically in the past 3 weeks of daily lessons with Emma. Ilara nodded, not trusting herself to sign back. "Me too," Aldrich signed, and Ilara's eyes widened in surprise. Her father, scared. The king smiled, a rare and genuine expression. "But we will be scared together, and Emma will be there. You trust her?" "Yes." "Then trust this." Aldrich's hands moved slowly, making sure his daughter understood. "You deserve to be seen, to be heard, not hidden away like something broken." "But I am broken," Ilara signed, her small hands heavy with resignation. "I can't speak like you." Aldrich took his daughter's hands in his. "You speak perfectly. The world just needs to learn your language." He said it aloud, then signed it. Imperfect but sincere. "The world needs to learn your language." The great balcony overlooked the main courtyard where thousands had gathered. Humans and vampires alike, dressed in spring colors, carrying lanterns even in daylight as tradition required. Emma stood to the side as the royal family emerged, the king first, majestic and commanding. Then Ilara, so small beside her father, her face pale but determined. The crowd erupted in cheers. But when they noticed the young princess, many seeing her clearly for the first time, the sound faltered, confused. Aldrich raised his hand for silence. His voice carried across the courtyard, amplified by the ancient acoustics built into the palace walls. "My people, today my daughter joins me, not as a shadow, but as your princess." He gestured to Ilara, who stepped forward, her legs trembling. Aldrich's hand moved to his daughter's shoulder, steady and supportive. "Princess Ilara will address you now. Miss Thorne will provide her voice." Emma moved to stand between them, visible to all, a human girl on the royal balcony, history being made in real time. Ilara looked at her father, terrified. Aldrich nodded encouragement. The princess's hands began to move. "Thank you for coming," she signed, and Emma's voice rang out clear and strong. "Thank you for coming." The crowd stirred. Ilara's hands moved faster, gaining confidence. "I know I am different. I know I cannot speak the way you expect. But I can still hear, I can still care. I can still hope to serve you one day." Emma translated every word, her voice steady even with tears pricking her eyes. "My father taught me that strength comes in many forms," Ilara continued, looking at the king. "And my friend taught me that being different doesn't mean being less." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Then her hands moved in a broad gesture that needed no translation, a sign for beautiful, directed at the lanterns they carried. Someone in the crowd, a small child, waved back, mimicking the gesture. Then another person signed, "Hello," awkward and uncertain, then another. A ripple of movement spread through the crowd as people began to raise their hands, trying simple signs, trying to speak back to their princess in her own language. Ilara's face transformed. Her signs became animated, joyful, as she told them about the spring flowers in her courtyard, about birds and stories and hope. And beside her, King Aldrich raised his own hands. "Proud," he signed for all to see. "Proud of you." The crowd understood the gesture even without translation. The emotion was universal. The cheers that erupted weren't polite ceremony. They were genuine, thunderous and warm, washing over the balcony like a wave. For the first time, Princess Ilara wasn't invisible. She was seen. The lanterns floated like fallen stars above the city, thousands of them rising into the twilight sky. From the palace terrace, a private one this time, away from ceremony and crowds, 3 figures watched in comfortable silence. Ilara sat between her father and Emma, her legs swinging over the edge of the stone bench, still wearing her formal robes, though she had convinced someone to remove the stiff collar. Her face glowed with lingering excitement, cheeks flushed from the day's events. "Did you see how many people tried to sign back?" Her hands moved quickly, the way they always did when she was happy. "There was a little girl in a yellow dress who signed hello and thank you, and I signed back and she smiled so big and—" "Breathe," Emma signed, laughing silently. Ilara grinned but didn't slow down. "And the baker from East Market. He signed bread and asked if I liked bread, and I said yes, and he looked so happy that I understood, and—" "What is she saying?" Aldrich asked, leaning forward. His signing had improved, but Ilara's excited speed still outpaced his ability to follow. "She's recounting everyone who signed to her today," Emma translated, warmth in her voice. "All 47 of them, in detail." Aldrich's expression softened. He reached out and gently caught one of his daughter's flying hands. "Slow," he signed carefully. "I want to understand." Ilara took a deep breath and began again, more slowly this time, making sure her father could follow. She signed about the crowd, about the feeling of being seen, about not being invisible anymore. And Aldrich understood most of it. Not all. There were still signs he didn't know, concepts he couldn't follow. But enough. More than enough. When Ilara finished, the king's hands moved deliberately. "Proud of you. So proud." It was the same sign he had made on the great balcony, but somehow it meant more here in private, with no audience to perform for. Ilara threw her arms around her father's waist, and Aldrich pulled her close, a large hand cradling the back of his daughter's head, the way he used to when Ilara was a baby, before silence had grown between them like a wall. "Thank you," Aldrich said softly to Emma over his daughter's head, "for giving her back to me." "I didn't do anything," Emma replied. "I just listened." "You did everything. You saw her when the rest of us were blind." The king's eyes were bright in the lantern light. "You saw her when the rest of us were blind." A comfortable silence settled over them as they watched the lanterns climb higher, carrying the city's wishes and prayers into the night sky. After a while, Ilara pulled away from her father and signed something Emma couldn't quite catch. The king frowned, trying to follow, then looked to Emma for help. "She's asking if you'll tell her a bedtime story," she translated, "in sign language, so she can understand every word." Aldrich's expression flickered, uncertainty, fear of failing, then determination. "I can try," he signed, "but I'm not good with stories." "You don't need to be good," Ilara signed back. "You just need to be here." Something in those words struck Aldrich deeply. Emma saw it in the way his shoulders dropped, in the way his breath caught. "I'll leave you two alone," she said, starting to rise. "No," Ilara signed urgently. "Stay, please. You're part of this too." So she stayed. King Aldrich, ruler of the Vampire Kingdom, conqueror of realms, began to sign a story. Awkward and slow, often pausing to ask Emma for help with signs he didn't know. It was about a warrior who had forgotten how to be gentle and a small bird who taught him to listen instead of fight. It wasn't a very good story. The plot wandered. The signs were imperfect. But Ilara watched her father's hands with complete focus, her dark eyes shining. And when Aldrich signed the part where the warrior finally understood the bird's song, the princess smiled so widely it looked like her face might split in two. When the story ended, Ilara clapped in the silent applause Emma had taught her, bouncing with delight. "Again," she signed. "Tell another." "It's late," Aldrich signed back, but he was smiling. "Tomorrow. Promise?" "Promise." Ilara yawned despite herself, the excitement of the day finally catching up with her. Aldrich stood, lifting his daughter easily. 7 was still young enough to be carried, though not for much longer. At the door, the king paused and turned to Emma. His free hand moved, forming signs that had taken hours to practice in private. "Thank you for teaching me to see my daughter." "She was always there," Emma signed back. "You just needed to learn her language." "We all did," Aldrich agreed. Then, with his daughter falling asleep against his shoulder, he added, "Tomorrow I will issue a royal decree. Sign language will be taught throughout the palace. To the guards, the servants, the council members, everyone. Your Majesty, that's not enough, but it's a beginning." His expression was serious now, regal. "No child in my kingdom should feel invisible because the world won't learn her language, and no parent should be separated from their child by something as simple as words." He carried Ilara away, the princess's small hand trailing behind them, fingers moving dreamily in unconscious signs, even as she drifted toward dreams. Emma remained on the terrace, watching the last lanterns disappear into the stars. She thought about the terrified girl who had spilled wine 3 weeks ago, certain she would be executed for speaking to a princess. About a lonely child who had learned that being different meant being invisible. About a king who had forgotten how to be a father until his daughter taught him that strength came in many forms. Below in the courtyard, she saw palace guards already practicing signs with each other, laughing at their mistakes, trying again. Servants teaching nobles, nobles teaching children, a language of hands spreading through the palace like spring flowers after a long winter. A new tradition born from a moment of broken crystal and spilled wine, born from a simple question. "Are you all right?" And an answer that changed everything. "Yes, now I am." 6 months later, the Royal Library held its first public sign language hour. Princess Ilara, now 8 years old, taught a room full of children, human and vampire alike, how to sign their names, tell stories, and speak without voices. Her father attended every session, sitting in the back, still learning, still trying, still there. And when Ilara signed her stories, hands moving like lightning, painting pictures in the air, the entire room understood. Finally, the silent princess had found her voice, and the kingdom had learned to listen.